The Puppet Master. Listen, there are strings in this city, gossamer thin, black as oil slicks, that hum above the cracked rooftops like taut violin wires. You don't see them until they tighten. By then, it's too late. I learned that truth on a rain-scarred Tuesday, beneath street lamps that buzz like dying cicadas. My name is Ellis Granger, 32, accounts clerk, dependable, invisible. At least, I was. That night, when the lights flickered, I felt a tug deep in the muscles of my arms, a phantom pull that made my fingertips twitch, as though someone else were testing my tendons for strength. I laughed it off. A spasm. Stress. Too much coffee. But a single twitch becomes a jerk, and a jerk becomes a command. Dunridge was once a jewel of iron bridges and midnight jazz. Now it sags beneath mold-webbed tenements, alleyways that stink of damp plaster and lost hope, a perfect stage for secrets. Peel back the wallpaper in any apartment, and you'll find another layer beneath, like the city can't remember which mask it should be wearing. Everyone in Dunridge whispers the same legend, a shadowy figure called the Puppet Master, who orchestrates fate itself. Some claim he is centuries old, shaping riots, romances, even stock crashes with a flick of his unseen wrist. Others insist he's a ghost, born from the guilt that hangs over Dunridge like smog. The stories differ, but they end the same. Cut the strings, and the world unravels. Wednesday morning, I awoke standing in my kitchen, arms raised as though presenting myself to an invisible audience. My kettle boiled dry on the stove, steam-painted ghostly marionette crosses on the ceiling. I couldn't recall turning it on. When I tried to lower my arms, they obeyed, slowly, resentfully, like stubborn marionettes whose strings had slackened for just a breath. At work, my fingers danced across spreadsheets in patterns I didn't recognize. Columns rearranged, names altered, numbers humming, some clandestine melody. My supervisor barked something about incorrect figures, but his voice sounded distant, as though filtered through thick velvet curtains. Inside my skull, a quieter voice repeated a single phrase, "You move because I will it." I rode the subway home, watching dull reflections quiver in the windows. Neon flickered outside, a jester silhouette advertising a circus long defunct. For a split second, the jester winked, or was it pulled by filament, eyelid jerked shut by a hidden hand? My pulse answered in frantic staccato, short, punchy beats. That night, I dreamed of wooden limbs piling at my feet, armless dolls with painted smiles, their joints tangled in red thread. I awoke with splinters embedded in my palms. The clues appeared like breadcrumbs drenched in blood. On Thursday, a crimson string, the diameter of a human hair, lay coiled on my pillow, tied in a lover's knot. Friday, I stepped on a wooden puppet's knee joint outside my apartment door. Its hinge rusted, initials EG carved inside. Saturday, the walls themselves seemed to sweat charcoal silhouettes, outlines of bodies hanging limp, wrists hoisted to some ceiling-high point beyond vision. I traced each omen, desperate to map a pattern. The city answered with more riddles. Beneath a bridge, I found a mural half submerged in moss. A man dangling 5 shadow puppets, whose faces blurred like wet ink. In the abandoned tram depot, a theater poster curled against rusted tracks. The Grand Puppeteer, one night only. My own name appeared in the cast list, scrawled over in fresh black marker. At every turn, I felt that internal tug, soft, then forceful, as though an impatient conductor were yanking me back on tempo. My wrist would jerk right instead of left, toes pivot toward darker streets, voice catch in my throat just when I tried to ask for help. Time thickened like old syrup, routine eroded, co-workers avoided my blank stare, friends' messages stacked unread. Inside, a second Ellis paced the floorboards of my mind, knocking to be let out, begging me to hold still. But my body had become a puppet theater, and the strings were tightening. Some nights I'd sit before a mirror, flashlight tilted upward, watching the skin of my face ripple. Shadows behind me seemed to braid themselves into cords that vanished into the crown of my skull. With every blink, I saw them. With every blink, they were gone. My journal degraded from full sentences to jittery scrawl. Who holds the crossbar? Why do my legs remember routes I never walked? I smell sawdust in my blood. Between lines, I caught the faint scent of varnish, the tang of oiled wood. The crescendo came on Sunday, the anniversary I never acknowledged. 2 years earlier, I'd signed off on faulty numbers, just a rounding shortcut, that approved a shoddy renovation permit. Weeks later, a balcony in South Dunridge collapsed, killing a woman and her 7-year-old son. An accountant's error, they called it. No criminal intent. I buried the article in a drawer and buried my remorse deeper. But guilt is a master craftsman. It carves until it fits a shape that can breathe, until it can pull. As dusk bled violet over the skyline, my feet carried me, without consent, to the derelict Orpheum Theater perched on the river's edge. Moss-choked gargoyles watched as double doors yawned open. Inside, rows of moth-ridden seats formed an audience of hollow eyes. The stage smelled of dust and old applause. Threadbare curtains trembled, though no wind stirred. On the stage floor lay a marionette, life-sized, carved from dark walnut. It wore my suit, my watch, my timid slouch. Red strings stitched into its wrists trailed upward into darkness. Above, a catwalk creaked. "Look," whispered the voice inside my ribs. "See how well you dance." I climbed the stage, limbs shook under a puppet's gravity. Every step felt dictated. I reached up, fingers clawing the air until they snagged one living thread. Warm, almost pulsing. The theater lights flared, revealing a silhouette high above. A tall figure operating a black wooden crossbar, its outline blurred as though painted in smoke. The puppet master. No face. Only the suggestion of a smile carved from absence. In that instant, the strings yanked hard. My arms flew outward, legs bowed, head tilted. The walnut double of me performed the same grotesque salute. We were mirrors pulled by the same hand. I screamed, but the sound emerged as splintered laughter, a rattle of wood hitting wood. The audience of empty seats leaned closer, seatbacks groaning in anticipation. Desperation cuts deep grooves. I seized the knife prop lying beside the puppet's feet. Stage steel, dulled by time. My hand, our hand, raised it to sever the nearest string. But the puppet master flicked a wrist. My elbow locked, blade pivoted. The walnut puppet's throat split open instead, sawdust gushing like gray snow. Through that ragged gash, I glimpsed a photograph folded into the hollow torso. The woman and her child from the balcony collapse, smiling beneath brighter skies. My lungs collapsed inward, guilt flooded arteries like quicklime. "You made me," the void above seemed to hiss, though no mouth moved. "You wrote the tragedy, I direct the encore." The theater lights died. In darkness, I felt dozens of threads wrap around my shoulders, ribs, neck. Gentle at first, then tightening until each vertebra burned. I jerked and flailed, but every motion only entangled me deeper. Somewhere, I heard the creak of wood, my marionette twin rising, head lolling as if studying me. Was that puppet now the master? Was I the doll? Lines between flesh and timber blurred, my senses fractured into impossible vistas. I stand in the Orpheum, manipulating a figure below whose screams sound like mine. I crouch inside a string-plucked body, watching my own face leer down from the catwalk. I float above both, fingers dancing feverishly, orchestrating this morbid duet. Reality snapped back like an overstretched cord. The theater was empty. No puppet, no strings, just me on my knees, palms bleeding from clutching the dull knife. Had I imagined it all? But over the stage, faint as moonlit spider silk, dozens of threads swayed. I rose, every joint screaming, then took the knife to my forearm. One quick slice, not deep enough to kill, but sharp enough to feel. Blood-welled ruby, warm and real. The strings above writhed in sympathy, tightening. Pain clarified what reason could not. Whether the puppet master was phantom or guilt-made flesh, the control was anchored inside me. With a roar that was equal parts fury and confession, I hurled the knife into the rafters. It clanged off the crossbar, severing a single thread. For a heartbeat, weight lifted. My chest expanded with stolen freedom. Then the cut string snapped back like a recoiling serpent, wrapping around my throat. Hot pressure blackened the edges of sight. I choked, fingers clawing air. Somewhere above, I heard wood break, metal shriek. the entire rigging system collapsing like a dying marionette show. Dust rained, boards splintered, silence. I woke sprawled on the street outside the Orpheum as dawn fingered the horizon. Passers-by hurried past, oblivious. My clothes were immaculate, skin unmarked, except for a fresh crimson thread tied around my wrist in a perfect lover's knot. I returned to daily life, smiled at coworkers, balanced ledgers with mechanical precision. Yet, in reflective surfaces, I catch a jolt, my own arms shifting a fraction too early, as though awaiting instructions. At night, I smell sawdust again. Hear muffled applause. Feel the kiss of strings settling against my shoulders like deadly silk scarves. Was the puppet master real, or did I carve him from the rot inside my conscience? It does not matter. Creation and creator are entwined now, inseparable. I walk, therefore he pulls. He pulls, therefore I walk. And you, listening to my voice, might wonder if your next breath is truly yours. You'll tug at your fingers, frown when they twitch unbidden. You'll glance up at empty ceilings, praying not to see black wires descending. But remember, guilt is patient, and every secret is a spool of string waiting for a hand to wind it tight. So, when the lights flicker tonight and your legs carry you someplace you never meant to go, ask yourself one question. Is it choice or choreography?